Today I'm going to show you how to make rubber stamps with a sugar-like substance and a 3D printer. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to create the size of the stamp. This is the maximum size that we want, and then we're going to put a text inside of it. We'll just make the text as big as possible. So this is our text for just making sure that we get the proper size. So 12 millimeter is what we're going with. So we know that we can then lower these down to make the mold smaller. We'll just remove the text for now. We'll expand this to 10 millimeters. And then we'll go down again on it. We go down 7 millimeters, and then we'll put the text that we want. And we'll put it in the 12 millimeter that we wanted. Turn it the right way around. And we'll put it roughly in the center. Then we'll make a little we're going to make a thing that helps keep the stamp in the right position. This is entirely optional, so I want to make it so that this outside area is parallel to the paper. It makes it easier to get the stamp properly on it. You can remove it and just do this part, the text part, and it'll just work fine. There we go, and then we'll punch this into it. Maybe I should put bold into it. Let's bold it. Yeah, it'll fit. There we go. Now we have the mold part. Then we're going to need the handle. Yeah, we need a 0.2 millimeter clearance, and as we have a 0.5 millimeter clearance, that's quite enough. And then we're going to make this into a separate object. Just make sure that we can actually see what we're doing. Yeah, that seems about enough. And then we're going to make a handle to it. There we go. Now we have a handle. Just put a chamfer on it. Chamfer, let's put a fillet on it instead. Yeah, that looks nice. And we'll put a little fillets on the outside edges. Mostly they just remove unnecessary material, making the print faster. And there we go. That's mostly now done. Now we have the bottom part where the sugar-like substance will be put in, and then we have the handle that will be attached to that substance. Now we then need to print these parts out so that we can then make the stamp itself. Oh yeah, forgot to mention. We'll just hide the handle part. We're going to do some chamfers so that pulling the parts out will be easier. And we'll do it with 2 distances. One goes 1 millimeter that direction and the other one goes down, down, down. There we go. Now there's a slight slant, and then we're going to have to modify the fillets. There we go. Now we have a slight slant, and this way it will be a lot easier to pull out the stamp from the mold. And once that's done, we'll just go to Tools and then make 3D print. Select the part that we want to make, refinement high, and then just click OK and we'll save it. And for some reason that's not visible in OBS. Now that we have our parts in our slicer, we'll just arrange them, and we're going to add some modifiers to the handle so that it'll work correctly. So we'll add modifier and just a box, bring the box to the middle of it and change the size. Say that's 40, and that's 10, and that's 100. There we go, and then we'll just move it to the correct position. There we go, and we'll give it some values. And we'll change the infill to honeycomb, and then we'll add another modifier, or rather another setting, and layers and perimeters, and we're going to remove the top and bottom layers. Now, once we slice this, the handle turns into honeycomb, and the handle part still contains gyroid and will work fine. So once we have the sugar stuff in the mold itself, we'll push the handle into it, and the sugar will come into the honeycomb and latch onto that, and that way we'll have a nice stamp. So now we have a 2-hour print. We'll just go ahead and print this. Oh yeah, there's another thing that we need to modify. We actually want 3 perimeters. There we go. And we'll have a 2-hour print. We'll go and do that, and we'll go to the next part. Here are the finished prints. They came out really nicely, and with them done, we can get on to the next step. For that, we're going to need cornstarch and some silicone window sealing stuff. We're going to start by sprinkling around some cornstarch. Then we're going to fumble around with the silicone applicator that we forgot to open and make a mess of ourselves. Once the silicone has been cleaned off the cat and the furious spouse has been placated, we can get on to the next part, which is to give a couple of squeezes of silicone on top of the cornstarch, and then sprinkle some more cornstarch on top of that. Since the silicone applicator gets very excited, make sure that you place it in a place that it can drop its excitement droplets on, as they are a bit of a pain to clean. In our high-tech process, we're just going to smush the cornstarch into the silicone, periodically adding more cornstarch to get the desired consistency. If you don't get enough volume, don't worry, just add more silicone and then add even more cornstarch. Do wear gloves while you're doing this, because silicone sticks to everything and doesn't really want to come off. What we're looking for is a very dough-like consistency, and even then you usually want to have some cornstarch on hand so that you can easily add more when it becomes very sticky. The canister of silicone says that it has a curing time of 15 minutes, which is nice to know when you notice that you actually didn't put any mold release on your molds, and you're going to have to go and do that now. I'm just using canola oil, but I've also seen people use petroleum jelly as the mold release, and it worked fine. Once the molds have been looped up and your dough is ready, take a piece of the dough and smush it into all of the little tiny details of your mold. This way, there's less of a chance that you get air trapped under the silicone, which ruins your piece. Once you're under the illusion that you have actually managed to put the dough into all of the teeny tiny crevices of your mold, take the rest of your dough and smush it on top of that. Once that's done, we'll take the handle that we purposefully perforated and then smush that into the silicone dough. This way, the silicone will bond to the handle and you have a nice handle for your stamp. Now we just have to wait. I waited for roughly an hour before I even considered taking out the stamp from the mold, but this wait time is dependent on the curing time of the silicone that you chose. You'll find this information in the container that the silicone comes in. Once you've wiped off the mold release off your print that you just pulled out, you can get on to stamping. The most observant of you may have noticed that we have two failures. We have both gotten air trapped under the silicone, and we have a part of the stamp that was too thin and snapped off. These are things that you have to take into account when you design the mold, as well as when you're filling it. But let's get to some test stamping. I had this ink pad laying around, and we'll get some ink onto the stamp and we'll smush that onto a paper and see what we get. Everything else seems to make a nice impression onto the paper, except the L and the dot from the exclamation point, which have been trapped into the mold. This is why you need to make the edges a little bit slanted so that you can actually pull them out of the mold. Now let's look at another stamp that I made earlier that doesn't have these problems because the letters are bigger. And as we can see, the results are rather nice. But remember, failure is the only way you will actually learn. I hope this has been informative, and I'll see you next time.